The pink acquiring movement skills strand of the specification requires us to look at abilities. Specification specifically says you've got to define and identify the characteristics of gross motor abilities and psychomotor abilities, and we'll have a look at those in this video. So if you were to look at this netballer attempting to, rather precariously I think, intercept a pass, what qualities do you think that this performer has to have in order to be able to do that skill, in order to intercept the pass? Just pause and have a think about that. So you hopefully came up with these kinds of qualities. They need good explosive strength or power to drive off the ground, to jump to the ball. They need reaction time. Once they see a stimulus, the ball coming, they need to react to it as quickly as possible. They need coordination to make sure that their arms and legs move in the right fashion at the right time. They need to be able to make decisions and choices about when to intercept based on the information of the players around them. And they need to be quite balanced in terms of being stationary or moving. Now, we'll look at this again at the end of this video, but these basically are abilities that a performer should have, and they're blue and green to denote the different kinds of abilities, again, which we'll go through now. So ability is defined as an inherited, relatively enduring trait that underlies or supports various kinds of motor and cognitive activities or skills. Abilities are thought of as being largely genetically determined. So Schmidt's definition there is pretty wordy, but we can pick out a couple of key things. The first is that it's genetic or innate. It's largely genetically determined, so you can't particularly change your ability. You're born with a certain level of ability, or certain abilities, I should say. Second thing, it's relatively enduring trait, so it's quite stable. Ability doesn't change. You have it or you don't have it, and if you have it, you can then build on it to develop skills and performance in a certain sport. So it's a stable trait. And thirdly, really importantly, abilities underpin all the skills that you perform in your sports. We must have certain abilities to be able to perform a certain sport. If I just go back to the previous slide, if this athlete didn't have explosive strength, had poor reaction time, wasn't coordinated, couldn't make decisions, and was unbalanced, they wouldn't be able to intercept this pass. They wouldn't be a good netballer. So these different kinds of abilities are required to play this sport and to do this skill. So you'll need to be able to identify the characteristics of ability. And we've identified that there are two types of ability. I did my abilities in two different colours purposely. So gross motor abilities are abilities that are to do with movement and what you might understand as the physical fitness, the components of fitness. Whereas psychomotor abilities, and the clue perhaps is the word psych, involve using your brain, processing information, making decisions, and then actioning them. So there's a degree of psychology, of brain work before the movement, the motor. Here is the big list of gross motor abilities. So remember, these are the physical motor abilities. Gross motor equilibrium, so balance of the whole body. Stamina, which I'm sure you know. Explosive strength, dynamic strength, and static strength, which I'm sure you know. Flexibility and dynamic flexibility. So flexibility of your back in particular and your trunk movements, and flexibility whilst moving. Trunk strength, so abdominal, core strength, and then whole body coordination. So these are all, a lot of them are components of fitness that you would know. So if you can remember the components of fitness, you'll remember your gross motor abilities. And I put several of them in yellow because I think they're the easiest ones to remember. I wouldn't recommend you learn them all. I'd recommend you probably try and learn a handful of them. So here are psychomotor abilities, a little bit more complex, but again I've put in yellow those that I think are a bit easier to remember and perhaps easier to apply. So psychomotor abilities are about processing information and making decisions leading to action. Manual dexterity, so manual is hands and arms and being able to make accurate movements quite quickly with those limbs is dexterity. Aiming, obviously, I'm sure you know what aiming is, so aiming at a particular, having accuracy in your aim. Response orientation, a bit of a gobbledygook phrase, but basically means being able to process information and make a decision, make a choice really quickly. And that might relate to our netballer. So if they have good response orientation, they can take in the information of where the other defenders and attackers are and make a choice about when to react. Reaction time, so purely being able to respond quickly to stimulus. So that might be your 100-meter sprint start, the gun goes and you react very quickly, whereas this response orientation has an element of decision making. And we've got some others there which you can look at, but I'd probably recommend trying to learn the yellow ones there. So here's a sort of a summary list of all the gross motor and the psychomotor abilities, and I've identified in yellow again which ones I'd suggest would be a little easier to remember. And then going back finally to our netballing example, so we identified these as qualities that this performer would need to be able to really intercept the pass well. Blue is our gross motor and green are our psychomotor abilities. So lastly then, thought for you. What abilities underpin the skills central to your sport? Now this might be relevant in terms of understanding your sport or doing your EPIP where you do an evaluation of performance. So think about the skills in your sport and see if you can come up with some gross motor and psychomotor abilities that would be appropriate to be able to execute those skills.